Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good afternoon. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next 2 hours here on Radio Hamra. Studio number to call in 310-441-0555. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, so you can call in with any questions related to clinical psychology, including any emotional or psychological issues, parenting issues, and relationship issues as well. You can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram, or like my page on Facebook to get updates on the show, or suggest topics or books for the program. And the shows are uploaded at the end of each week to my SoundCloud page and podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Again, our studio number 310-441-0555. So this is my last show for 2021. I think for many of us, since the pandemic has started, time and the calendar and the years are going by in a way that feels quite different. And actually, the book I'm reading this week that I'll talk about on Monday's show is about looking at time and how we view our time. It's called 4,000 Weeks. So looking forward to finishing that up and talking with you about it on Monday. But for many people, these last couple of years have felt very different, and they have been. Especially things like this feeling of what does last year mean? I remember especially in earlier, when I would think of last summer, you would think of 2 years ago sometimes, because the previous summer you really didn't do much, whereas you might have done more before. And so the way we kept track of time has definitely changed and become something quite different. So on Monday's show, I'll probably get into that a little bit more, since it is a book about time. I'll share some more of my thoughts about that. But what I wanted to talk about today is something that probably many people are thinking about, or will start thinking about, especially in the next few days. Things like New Year's resolutions and New Year's goals. What we're going to do in 2022 and all the things we hope to accomplish. I might get more into the details of the goals in the next segment. But right now I wanted to talk about something that we see affecting the ways we think about our future self and the goals we can achieve or we're going to achieve. Get ready to see a lot of posts saying things like, new year, new you. But I have news for you that you're going to be the same you. Doesn't mean you can't grow and evolve and set goals. I'm all about that, actually. But there is a way that we think of our future self in a way that's not realistic. And even research shows us that the way that we think of our future self is different from the way we view our current self, which is quite interesting. So when they do fMRI studies and look at the brain, and they have someone think about themselves, there's certain parts of the brain that are more likely to light up. And if they keep thinking about themselves, those parts light up. And then if you ask them to think about someone else, that part of the brain is less likely to light up. Other parts light up more. And the more different the person feels from you, the more likely it is that your brain will look different from when you're thinking about yourself. So it's interesting, that part of it as well. But what's really interesting is when you think of your future self, no longer does that part of your brain light up that is related to the present self. So in a way, it's almost like we see our future selves as a stranger, or as someone different from us, as not us. And of course, we could get into arguments or discussions about what is the sense of self. Is there really a one sense of self, of me? Is that a stable thing? And I think those are actually quite interesting arguments and discussions to have. But here, we'll just come back to the sense of this enduring self that is me in this, let's say, physical body. Even that changes, but that goes forward. And how I see this me in a year differently than I see the me today. And so this can make sense, because when I'm me right now, I feel everything that I'm feeling or experiencing, or if I think of doing something, I can directly feel it. But when I think of my future self, I don't have to feel those things. I really can't feel what I'm feeling 5 years from now. I can assume it'll be related to what I feel now or experience now, but I don't have to feel it. And this is why we can be so idealistic about our future self. We can think, okay, starting January 1st, 2021, even though I haven't gone running for a long time, I'm going to wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and go run every single day. Why not? Why can't I do it? And there's some truth to that. Why can't you do it? You can, but there is this notion that we have to recognize the you that's going into 2022 is still the same you that is here. Yes, we're changing and evolving, but we shouldn't expect that all of a sudden the calendar changes and you're going to be a completely different person. And so this is why there's lots of reasons why we set goals and they don't come true or we fail to achieve them. It's just hard to change to begin with. But also we don't make realistic or the right types of goals at times. So if you have a hard time with cigarettes and you say all of a sudden January 1st I'm never going to smoke again, well, you might be setting yourself up for failure, or at least very likely to fail, because the goal is not taking you into account, the actual you that exists, because you're imagining this idealized future you. And so, yes, we should think about how can I become the best version of myself and go towards that. I think that's actually quite important and something we always want to be thinking about and evaluating. But one of the issues I see coming up when people set goals or try to think of how they want to get to somewhere else is that if we think new year, new me, new year, new you, you're going to be this different person, then we don't take into account enough ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, what has worked for us in the past, what hasn't worked for us, what we would need to do differently to achieve our goals. It's almost like this different person is going to be doing it, so I'll just do it. And that obviously is less likely to work than realizing, you know what, it's still going to be me next year. I actually have a hard time waking up so early. Or if I want to wake up that early, I need to change my night schedule so I sleep earlier if I want to wake up and work out. And is every day too much at the beginning that I'll give up? And that's another problem. We set these goals and we can be so black and white in our thinking that once we don't achieve the goal or we fail at achieving it perfectly, we give up completely. So you say, I'm going to run every day. You do it 3 days, you take a day off, and I'm like, well, I already failed, so who cares? And we just give up completely on that. And that's unfortunate. This is why actually I think we should think about the value or the reason why we're achieving the goal and then come up with a specific metric for it. So let's say you want to get healthier or lose some weight or get in shape. That's something you're trying to go towards, which is more abstract. And then you come up with a specific goal like exercising X number of times a week. But you have to recognize that you're still going towards that value or that aspiration of, let's say, being healthier. And so even if you don't achieve the goal, don't give up on it completely. You haven't failed at the goal. You have just had a setback in achieving it in exactly the way you had planned out, which is almost always going to be the case. Rarely do you meet your plan exactly. The plan is more of a map or a guiding force, not something that's going to dictate exactly what happens. And so if we think that it's going to be a different us in the future, which we know our brain has a tendency, or really that's how it thinks of us, we're less likely to think about actually who we are, what works for us individually and what doesn't work. Another issue that comes up related to this idealized view, and it relates to what I was saying before, is we don't have to feel the pain of that future self when we think about it. It's like, well, why wouldn't I wake up at 5 a.m. and just put my shoes on and go running? You can, and of course people do, and it's not that you can't do that, but if it's hard for you to do that or you haven't, well, of course you know that when you wake up at 5, there's going to be a strong pull from your brain and body saying go back to sleep because you feel so tired. And here's where we get really good at mental gymnastics and find a way to do the easier thing. And you'll say, well, maybe I should start tomorrow, or I should get new shoes, or you know what, it's actually really cold. Maybe it's even bad for me to run this morning. It's bad for my health. I said I want to be healthier. And so we can be incredibly good at finding a way to do the easier thing in the moment. Often we'll talk about addiction and how people who have an addiction can be very, very good at finding a reason why they should use, because it's the thing that feels better. You know what? I like starting on a Monday. Maybe it'll make sense for me to use really hard this weekend so I get it out of my system and then I never want to do it again. we always find a way. But in general, it's not just a thing that addicts do. All humans, we have a tendency to go towards that short-term comfort and gratification. And so we find a way. So if you just think of ourselves now and why wouldn't I do all these things? Well, it's because we're not thinking about the pain. And this also contributes to things like procrastination. Okay, I have to study now. You open the book, you get a little bit anxious or bored, and you say, you know what, tomorrow I'm just going to wake up and study 10 hours straight. I'm just going to keep studying. Why can't I? If I do 10 hours straight, I don't even need 10 hours. I could do 9 and take a break. It's so easy. But what we're forgetting is that it's the same you tomorrow that feels the same way. If it's hard for you to study right now, it's still going to be hard for you to study tomorrow. And maybe even you'll feel more pressure or stress because, let's say, the test is closer. It could even be more difficult to study tomorrow in some ways. And that is something we have to recognize, is you're not going to feel different tomorrow about studying. This is just your way of tricking yourself to take the easier way out. So when you set your goals, try to remember and take some time to connect to that future self using your present self. Okay, what does it feel like for me to wake up at 5 in the morning? Ooh, I hate it. I really don't like it. So maybe that's not going to work. And you might even adjust the goal. And so this is why I think it could be dangerous when we think of new year, new you, because we imagine just this idealized sense of self that isn't realistic at all. So of course you're not going to achieve that goal. Anything that's hard for you to do today is going to be hard for you to do tomorrow. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but not to think of it in a way that I can just easily figure it out in the future. And this also, of course, when we say there's this parallel that when we think of our future self, it's like a stranger or it's not us. It's something you can keep in mind when you think about what happens to other people or the actions or behaviors of other people. On Monday's show, I was talking about parent shaming and how people are very quick to judge parents, usually if they're parents themselves, but sometimes even if they're not, of what they're doing wrong as a parent and how bad they are. But we do this in all areas of life where we look at what someone's doing and we're very good at saying, oh, I would never do that. You know, if I was in that situation and this was happening, I would never have acted that way. But that's because you're sitting in the comfort of your life, not facing that pain and what that person was going through. And it's easy to make the good decision now. This actually comes up with parents that I work with in therapy, because sometimes we'll explore something that's going on with their child and they'll say, here's an interaction I had and I said this. And let's say they said something really harsh or mean or was not good for the relationship for the child. And we'll work through some things they could have said, and I might suggest something to give an idea of the type of thing that might have been good in that scenario. And I can sometimes see in their face this feeling of, oh, like, you're right. I should have said that. You're so right about that. That's what I should have said. And I try to comfort them, not just saying something to comfort them, but the genuine truth is I say, look, I'm sitting here with no stress in a comfortable chair. Nothing is going on. It's very easy for me to come up with some ideas in this state of mind and in this state of what's going on. You were trying to get your kids out of the house. One kid was crying. The other one was doing this. You were running late. It's obvious that it's going to be a little bit harder to be the most calm and think things as through in that moment. So it could be good to remember this in that other angle as well of how do we judge others about what it's like to be in that situation, and know that you can try. This is part of empathy, part of we can use our imagination and use our brains to try to imagine what it's like, but to know that you don't know. You know, it's like if someone says, if you were freezing to death, would you do this? Now you can think about it, and sometimes these conversations are fun in a way of just like exploring or wondering, but to think you'd really know what you would feel like and what you would do if you were literally freezing to death, you were that cold, I think you have to be aware that whatever you say, take it with not just a grain of salt, a pinch of salt when you share whatever that is. So I think I would do this, but really you don't know. Or, you know, people sometimes, is a pretty horrific thing. They're in a burning building. They just jump out of the building. And you might think, I would never do that. I would try to find a way through or whatever. But you don't know. And it seems like a lot of people do that. Actually, it would probably make sense for you to think maybe I would do that, because you just don't know what else to do. You're burning. Your body is telling you to go away from that heat. And maybe actually there is a better chance of survival of jumping out of the building anyway. But still, you can get maybe that if you were in that type of heat where it's literally burning you alive, you would just jump out to where it's cooler, even if that's out of the building. So it could be important to keep this in mind, that we are not good at knowing what it's like exactly to feel a certain way, and then to determine what we would do based on that. And coming back to the original point, we unfortunately do that with ourselves as well. And so we have to be a little bit more realistic. I'm all about setting big goals and dreaming big and going for it really big. So it's not about that, but it's realizing that these are the ways that we might get in our own way because we're not thinking through what it's actually like to be us. Yes, new year, but same you. And I also don't like when people say new year, new you, because in a way it's saying the current you is unacceptable or unlovable. And I'm reminded of Carl Rogers' quote of, the curious paradox is only when I accept myself as I am, then can I change. So we have to love and accept ourselves as we are. It's not a new you. It'll be the same you, and a you that will hopefully grow and evolve. You can achieve things and set goals, but it's not going to be a different you that magically wakes up January 1st, 2022. So if we talk about goals later on today's show, we'll keep some of those things in mind. Let's go to a commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Studio number 310-441-0555. Let's go to a caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hi, Dr. Farid.
Hi, thanks for
Thank
calling.
you so much for taking my call.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
I'm a 54-year-old woman, and I actually been divorced twice. And I have two kids, 26-year-old and 23-year-old. My daughter, who's 23, lives with me. And I have a very difficult time in forming a very serious relationship with anybody. The latest that has happened, well, first of all, my belief is no sex before marriage. And that's one of the biggest obstacles that I'm finding in finding a relationship. Recently, 6 months ago, I moved to a different state. And through online, I met a guy who's 62. And we started out thinking this is not going to be any serious because he smokes, and that's one of the things that I don't like. And we just started as a friend. And he became very, very supportive, helping me find a house to buy, and so many ways he became like very, very supportive. And his kindness really made me think about a relationship. And he made it very clear that he wants to have a relationship with me, but he's not into having a marriage. Do you have any questions? Or
yeah, well,
should I just
there's two main places we can go. We can talk about him individually in that relationship, which we should, but also this sex before marriage. Of course, it's a personal, if you want to call it, belief or framework for what you want to do or not do. But it could be worth looking at. I'm not here to try to change your mind about it, but sometimes we can look at the reason why we have a certain rule for ourselves might not apply to where our life is at now, and it could be that it's coming from somewhere else. So I'm not saying that you should not do that. And I also, if you're okay exploring this issue, we can go a little deeper to see what else, because for some people, sex before marriage means no intercourse before marriage, but everything else is okay. I don't know what it means for you and where that value or, if you want to call it a value, comes from.
Yeah, for me, not only the intercourse, but kissing, holding hands, hugging, touching, all these are okay, as long as it doesn't become very sexual.
Okay.
Okay,
and where does that?
Go ahead.
I'm sure it's it's going to be from many factors, but where do you see that coming from? How do you understand this within yourself?
I've seen it because, for number one, it's a religious belief, and I know that at times I have broken that rule with other men, and that has caused me a lot of pain and regret. So that's why I became even more strict in regards, as I quickly tell them that I don't have sex before marriage, and many times even the first date doesn't happen because I say that over the phone before I meet them.
Which doesn't necessarily mean they were expecting sex on the first date. but if they know that's where you are at, it also tells them something about you in general. They're obviously, you'll be more conservative, or there's something about you that might
Right.
not be a match with them.
Correct.
I understand, there's an anxiety seems like you have of it's going to become an issue, so let me tell them quickly. I don't think it's
Exactly.
necessary to say it before the first date, because it's not necessarily something. We could talk about what you're looking for in general too in the first date, second date, about marriage or not marriage, things like that. But I think I could feel already there's this anxiety that this is going to be an issue, so you almost try to get it out of the way, but it might actually get in the
Hmm.
way because of that.
Yes, and it definitely causes issues. Um, so with this man that I met, about 11 years ago, he lost his 20-year-old daughter
Hmm.
to bulimia. And him and his ex, his wife suggested to be separated. So, he said, okay, permanently, we're going to get separated. So they have not finalized their divorce for 11 years.
Okay.
And
That's any reason why? Did he explain why they didn't actually go through with the divorce part?
he pointed out that, we just didn't see the need for it. Neither her nor me were going to get married. So we just left it like that. We agreed on everything. I mean, he has a lot of assets, so they already
Okay.
agreed on assets. What's going to be hers and what's going to be his. Um, but I feel that he told me many times that he does not want to get married.
Mm-hmm.
But later on, he would say, well, if I fall in love or, I cannot make that commitment going into a relationship saying that I'm going to get married, but we have to see what happens.
Okay. How long has it been? You said, did you say 6 months?
We've known each other for 3 months.
Okay.
And recently, the more I thought about this, no sex before marriage, I thought maybe I'm just being too strict, and maybe I'm missing out on good opportunities with some good men, because he's been really, really amazingly kind to me. And he's never pressured me before to have sex with him. So I told him, I said, I'm open to that. So this happened recently while he already planned to go to Iran and stay for 2-3 months there, and he said I might even come back and decide that I want to go back to Iran and stay there permanently. And he's leaving this Sunday, and he told me that before I leave, let's go and get a hotel and make love and all that before I leave for Iran. My question kept coming up is saying, what about, I don't know if I feel comfortable about your divorce. Why haven't you, I feel like the pain of loss of his daughter, has him attached to his ex, that he cannot let go of that marriage as much, and also told him that the thing is that he might even go and stay in Iran, and for me to have intimacy with him might cause me emotional attachment and then hurt me more in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether that decision was the right one. And he keeps saying, well, why do you have to overthink everything? Why can't you just let go? Life is too short, and just enjoy life while you have it. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And part of me wants that because I haven't been intimate with anyone for a long time, and part of me is scared.
Okay.
Um,
So, this is complicated because in some ways, the overall rule that you have about sex before marriage, to me, it is personal, but it's complicated because usually the religious belief is no sex before marriage and then you're married and that's it. But it's
yeah.
not planning for divorce and then what do you do after that, but it could feel the same way. And it's not that I'm suggesting you should be having sex before you get married, but that's what I meant, and we can maybe talk a bit more about that in depth of what does that belief mean to you. Usually these types of beliefs get so internalized and become so rigid that it's not about really looking at it. It's wrong and that's it, and it's just black and white. It just doesn't have There's no room for critical thinking or arguing about it. And I think it feels that way to you. Now, that being said, with him leaving Sunday, obviously it's going to be your choice of what to do here. But I could see that could be a way that, you have to ask yourself, we can't know for sure. It goes back to what I was talking about actually in the last segment about our future selves. You won't know for sure what you're going to feel. But could I regret that or feel bad about it if I did it in this circumstance when I know he's going? And there's a way that he's pushing it a little bit. I know you said he hasn't put pressure, but it seems like he is right now putting a pressure on you to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. And that, I could see how it feels different. So yeah, there's part of you, as you said, there's obviously desire and you want to experience it, and you might even want to feel like, well, I don't want to be stuck in this way, and just maybe let go some of those things he was saying, although it does seem like he was really trying to push you, to convince you, and all of a sudden everyone becomes like a life guru when they want to get someone to do something. Life is short, and enjoy it, and do these things. They become very good at trying to tell us that we should do what they want us to do. So that's the part that didn't feel kind of right to me. Doesn't mean it's the wrong decision for you to go ahead and do that, but I could have a concern because you have not you done that it could make you feel bad in this circumstance. If then he's going and he might not even come back, that you could feel bad. It's still going to be something for you to consider. Where are you at right now with it? Where are you on the decision?
Well, I already told him that I wasn't going.
Okay.
I wasn't going to do that. I told him it's not because I don't want to become intimate with you. I'm very attracted to you. The reason being, number one, is that you might stay in Iran, and with becoming intimate is going to create that bond, and it's going to really hurt me down the line. And second, your divorce is not final, and I'd rather be building a serious relationship with you when you are totally detached from your past. And he said, okay, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and based on what you're telling me, there's there's a few things that worry you, like the divorce not being official, and what does that mean? It could just be a formality, but there's something there, and the fact that he says he's going and might not come back. Now, yeah, you could. There's usually these things. There's not a black and white. There's something to what he's saying. You can enjoy the experience and be with him in that way. Like I said, for me, this I know it's pressing in the sense that it's in the next few days, but this overall feeling you might have, there's something about what he's saying that could be true of letting yourself experience things, not just in the sexual way, but do you try to protect yourself in other ways too, and not let go in some ways that might actually be necessary to enjoy life and enjoy yourself in different ways, and in relationships in general, not just sexually, do you hold yourself back? You mentioned 2 divorces, so it's possible there's something there of an expectation that you can get hurt or will get hurt if you get close or open up, which could create an ambivalence. Most people have, we talk about fear of intimacy. I even use it sometimes and say, oh, this person has a fear of intimacy. But really all human beings have this paradoxical relationship with intimacy where you really desire it, but we also fear it. We want to get close, feel seen, feel even attached to someone, have that type of a connection with someone. But it's also very scary because we can get hurt by them, and the closer you get, the more it hurts. And so that can be scary too. So we tend to have this paradox, and what we hope we do is we recognize the fear is there, but still go forward anyway. And by go forward, it doesn't mean without thinking about it and not using our head at all, but that we don't hold back from it, that we make a decision that, what, I want to go forward. Just like having kids, it's the most beautiful and meaningful experience we probably can have as human beings, but of course anything that can happen to them is the scariest thing and creates this an opportunity for us to face the worst pain we can experience as human beings if anything happens to them. So, but we're taking that risk anyway. We're saying it's worth it. And so with relationships, it's a similar thing. There's a fear, but we have to go forward. Now, for you, that fear maybe has grown in size over the years of what you've been through. And what I want to do is, we're about to go to commercial break. Share your thought there, and then we'll talk some more after break. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is that one sentence that he said that made me think that this is very a casual thing for him. is that he said, oh, let's say that we do it, and I go to Iran, and then you later on tell me, oh, I found someone and I'm not interested in being with you anymore. That's perfectly fine with me.
It's almost, yeah, I think he's telling you what he wants to happen, but
Exactly.
but kind of the no strings attached in a way, which it seems
Yep.
like that's the situation that you are in. So that's why, like I said, it's kind of interesting in a way. I feel like this rule is making you, it's not just about the rule itself. I think it's related to this rigidity you might have when it comes to relationships and dating. But this situation might not be the right place to change or break that rule because of the circumstances. Of course, you're going to have to make that decision on your own. So let's do this. We're going to go to a commercial break, but after the break,
Okay.
we'll come back and talk some more, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
All
Thanks.
right. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we were with a caller. Let's go back to them now. Caller, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure. Okay, so we were, getting to things that, as I mentioned, there's a specific thing coming up, especially with this gentleman and figuring out what to do. But I also think the bigger picture of it is more significant and something really for you to look at more closely. I do want to get into that aspect of yourself and in relationships. Do you see some of that in yourself, a fear of getting close, or is there any of that that you can notice in yourself?
I do, because
Okay.
most of my relationships have been long distance.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I unconsciously
Yeah.
just look at some things that are not going to happen.
Yeah, that's something I call it distant gratification. Sometimes we seek a pleasure that's far away because it's safer that way. And it's good
Right.
to be aware of that pattern, because if you notice it, you realize it's not by coincidence. Sometimes people say, oh, there's no good guys in LA or good girls here or wherever they live. They're always far away. And so when that's the case, we do have to look at it's probably not just, randomly or luckily it's happening that way. It's probably a reason why. So yeah, so you choose people that are far away because there's less risk in getting close and all the things that come up with it. And also, of course, the sexual side of things is off the table in a certain way. So I'm sure that makes it safer for you as well.
Yeah, and what is interesting to me is that two things that I normally I'm very sensitive about. I have kind of like let go with this man, even though I told him, "Oh, will you be able to quit your smoking at some point?" I see him drinking every time we're together. He has a glass of whiskey or wine, and I don't drink.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like there are a lot of things that I told myself many times I'm never gonna be with somebody who smokes, for example, or drinks, this level. A glass of wine here and there is okay, but not like hard liquor like that. But in his case, I have made an exception, it seems like, and this is almost the first time, besides my second, husband, that this relationship is a local relationship.
Mm-hmm. Wait, so your first husband was not local?
Yeah, he actually, the first ex, he was living, that wasn't local, and we only knew each other for 2 weeks. We got engaged, and after 3 months, we got married. I mean, that was something very...
Wow. Okay. How old were you then?
24.
24, and you met only for a few weeks. And while you were married, you lived in separate cities or countries?
Yes.
What's
Separate cities.
What were the cities? Like how far apart?
Like a 3-hour drive.
Okay. And why was that you had to be apart?
It was just that happened. We met each other through his cousin, and then the families were so strict that they kept saying that, oh, if you want to get to know each other, you have to get engaged. So, I didn't have much experience. I mean, no experience whatsoever with men. So I agreed to that, and that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
We had a 10-year marriage and 2 kids.
10 years. Okay, so there's 2 kids are from that.
Yes.
You said something about it kind of happened. There's a quote by Carl Jung where he says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so, at times we think, well, just something happened. And it's not to say, of course, life does have a lot of luck and things happen. So it's not to say none of it is. But often, and as you recognize, the long distance relationships, it could have been something to say, oh, it's fate or it's luck. But, you're realizing there's something there. It's possible even that marriage, there might have been something there that might have made that the type of marriage that felt more comfortable for you.
Yeah, another thing is that I've never been very comfortable as far as the sexually goes.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a situation where I would tighten up, and the intercourse was very painful for me.
Hmm. In your
I
marriage?
didn't realize while I was married, yes.
Well, okay. Now, is there anything in your past, any kind of sexual abuse or assault that has happened?
When I was younger, I think the only thing that I can remember was my cousin who was trying to rape me.
Wow.
That's the only thing that I can think about.
Okay.
In my childhood.
How old were you?
But nothing happened.
Okay. How old were you when that happened?
Probably was like 7, 8, or 9 years old.
And how old was your cousin?
3 years older.
Okay. And you fought him off, or what was?
Yes,
I
actually. I mean, it seems like the one incident that was a little bit of touching, and I don't know what happened that I got away. I don't remember really. But then after I don't know how long, when we got older, we're playing hide and seek, and he wanted to hide with me, and he said, well, do you want to do what we did when we were younger? And I realized what he's talking about, and I ran away from him.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. Those obviously can have an effect on you. Along with, I'm wondering how sex was talked about, or the values in most Iranian homes. And you mentioned the religious part. There's definitely, even more on women, this pressure to not be sexual, and more than just pressure, you're told how bad you are if you do it, or there's different degrees that happens. What was that like in your family?
Well, my dad was an alcoholic.
Okay.
And most of my teenage life, he was a drug addict. I remember when I was younger, I was sleeping in the same room or bed with my parents. And I used to hear, my dad would get drunk at night, and he wanted to have sex with my mom, and she would push him away. So that's what I remember growing up.
How old were you? Yeah, how old were you at or I guess what range was that happening?
It was before I was 10.
Okay. And what was the reason you were sleeping in their bed?
I think it was because, it was, those back in Iran mattresses, they would have on the floor, and I don't know whether we didn't have enough rooms or what happened, because there were 5 of us, that I was the youngest, and I was sleeping next to my mom.
Okay. Was any of it like, were you anxious about sleeping alone or anything like that?
No.
No, okay.
I don't remember about that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but I mean, those incidents also, did they know you could hear them, or would you pretend like you were asleep? What do you remember from that?
All I can remember was that I was pretending I was sleeping. But I clearly remember my mom pushing my dad's hands away, and, calling him drunk, and the mouth smells and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we could be pretty sure that had an impact on how you possibly saw men in general, but especially sex, this kind of thing of, it's not good, the woman is not going to want it, or the person's imposing, it's kind of disgusting, or, that whole thing likely had an impact on how you felt about sex. Can you see that connection, or do you feel like that had an impact?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember my mom constantly talking to us about how much our dad cheats and with another woman, and how much she hates men, and how men are not to be trusted. So, and I used to get really mad at my mom telling me this.
Yeah, of course.
I was very close to my dad.
Okay. So it seems like there's a fairly complicated relationship there that your dad, I don't know, as you know, you said he was an alcoholic and into drugs.
Yeah.
Was he around a lot or was he not around a lot? Because you're saying you were close to him.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was around. But I remember him every single night going to bed drunk, and he sometimes would say things that were harsh to me, or would say that if you become a doctor, I'm going to stop drinking.
Wow. If you become a doctor, I'll stop drinking?
Yeah.
Okay. I've heard of parents giving rewards for studying, but that's one I hadn't heard of yet. And did you follow that path at all?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Then that's fine. And his drinking had nothing to do with your schooling, but that is a strange way of putting a pressure on you. What do you remember feeling when he would say that? Would you actually think that was exciting, or was it like a bad feeling? What did you feel when he made that type of a comment?
I truly don't remember what I
Okay.
felt. But I just remember him saying that, and I was only average student. I think I had ADD in school, so I wasn't a top student. So I could never see myself becoming a doctor. You know.
Yeah. Now, and going back to, you said you were close with him. So how, in what ways were you close? What type of relationship?
We had
did you
common
have?
interests. You know, like he and I were into reading some novels, some books, watching comedy shows together. And also because I was a very good writer, you know, I would write essays and I would always want to read it to him, and he was always encouraging me, you know, how good of a writer I am.
Yeah. So I mean, most relationships are complicated, but I could see this one being very complicated, that you were wanting his approval and you were getting it in some ways that really mattered to you, but also with his drinking and the way he was, you're saying he could make these negative comments. Plus, if he's drunk, a lot of the times he's also checked out a lot of the times, and you know he's not going to really be there. And so there definitely could be this sense of not having him when you want to have him, or having him as much as you want, or knowing when you're going to get him. And you know, even I was thinking of him being distant, and that could be related to liking men who are distant or being comfortable with that when they're not so close. Because also I could see that you must have been a mixed feeling of wanting to be close to him, but he must have been a bit scary too if he was drinking the way you were saying, and sometimes getting angry or saying
at
things.
night was the only time that he would drink and then go to bed. You know, the only, like, another traumatic, really very painful time was when he went back to drugs. And I would follow him going to the basement, and you know, I was, you know, spy on him, you know, to go and do drugs. And I was always so, like, watchful of what he's doing. You know, he used to take out this little piece of this inside the smoke, you know, the cover of the cigarette, and would use that to do pots. So I always would go and check inside his cigarette box to see if he's doing drugs again or not. And so I became very, very cautious and you know, watchful, you know, what he's doing.
Yeah, well, it seems almost like a codependent type of, you're feeling like you had to try to stop him or know what's going on.
Exactly.
With him.
That's so funny you should mention that. I through the years I learned that I am codependent.
Yeah, so how have you seen that in your own relationships?
I feel like I find relationships that I can save or I can rescue someone. And with this man being so sad and so depressed, he sleeps during the day mostly and is up all night. That's what he says. You
This
know,
is
he
the
cannot
the
sleep.
person that you're currently with, or this gentleman? Okay.
He's very depressed. He's still mourning the loss of his daughter. And many times when he mentions it, I start crying. You know, it just, because I have the almost same age daughter and same exact name as his late daughter. That's the funny part.
Wow. Yeah, there's that obvious that connection there, but this sense that you're aware of this wanting to save or help the other person, it makes sense. You, I'm sure, had such a strong desire to help your dad or save him. as a young girl, if only I could help him, then he's going to be the dad I want, and I'll get the love I want. And children can unfortunately personalize it very much, that it's their fault if something doesn't go well, and if they do it right, they'll fix everything. And so we continue to take that going forward, that if I can just fix the person, everything is going to be okay. And there's also this feeling that if they need me, they'll never leave me. There's a safety there as well, that as long as I'm completely needed by the person, I can have that comfort and stability. But of course, one, we can never fix someone, and two, usually those relationships don't work, so either we leave or they leave, and it kind of confirms that fear all over again. So the more we're talking, the more it's really clear that there is so much anxiety around relationships. And even when we talk about codependency, that's related to wanting to control things more than we can and taking on responsibility more than we can. And so it seems like you bring that into your relationships as much as possible to protect yourself rather than let yourself experience them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's funny should say the way that this man was telling me. He said, don't you think that if we have intimacy, that's going to actually make me want to come back to U.S.?
Wow. That sounds pretty manipulative to me.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, that's it seems like he's pushing very, very hard to, now you're, it's like you're like an immigration, a guard or something. He's making it like you're going to determine what he does. It seems like he's pushing more than to me feels like it's just something comfortable, and that's my concern. Is I think you're torn because you also realize there's something in what he's saying that you might be holding on too much to try to control things and not letting go, and you're attracted to him, so you would look forward to enjoying that part of it too. But the way he's pushing you does seem a little bit like it's not going to be coming as much from you, this decision, which is the most important thing. And you might get to that point by the time the time comes in a few days, but we would want this to come from you. It might still feel uncomfortable whenever you decide to go in that direction, but we want it to be your choice.
Even the thought of it, and he would say, okay, we have to meet at 10 o'clock at night, and it's going to take 5 hours to make love. And the thought of it.
He's very ambitious man. We're actually had another commercial break, and I don't want to. I mean, it was a great moment to end because it was fun. But let's actually talk a bit more after the break, because I want to make sure we kind of leave you in a place where you feel a little bit better about whatever you're going to decide to do, and explore some of those issues a little bit more. Okay?
Okay.
All right. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we were with the caller. Let's go back to them now. Caller, still there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Good to hear you. Let's, we're talking about this issue that is coming up. As I said, there's a bigger problem and a smaller problem, or issues we're looking at. And what you shared about your upbringing, and it's very common in Middle Eastern families, sex can become a very taboo topic or thing, behavior, action to do, and we learn that we're bad if we do it and good if we don't. And then there always is a problem, especially that happens more for women, where they're told not to do it and they're so bad if they do it, but then once they're married, they're supposed to feel comfortable about it. But we can't just turn that on and off like a light switch. There's a feeling about that behavior itself not being okay. And I think also related to some of your own history and things you've gone through, control and letting go of control seems to be related to how you feel in relationships in general, but I think it can play a part in the sexual aspect as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah, and at
go
some
ahead.
point, even years and years ago, when my dad passed away, I don't know why, all of a sudden, I had a feeling that he might have sexually abused me, and I didn't remember it. Because of some comments when I was like a teenager he would make, some inappropriate comments that for some reason I kept on going flashback, I kind of remembered those, and I kept thinking did something else happen in my childhood that I don't remember. Um,
And those comments, did you remember them before he died, or those comments came back to you when he died?
no, I remembered them, but it didn't really,
Yeah.
I didn't emphasize on them. I didn't focus on them.
Yeah.
But for some reason, like when I was in college, if I would wear like something tight legging or something, my dad would make comments about how sexy it is or how it's a turn on or whatever.
So he wouldn't say you shouldn't wear that because it's something. He would
Exactly.
say it's sexy, or it's
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely inappropriate. And could it be it was just that? It's yes, but there could have been more. Especially, I mean, you also mentioned sharing a bed for I guess up until a certain age.
Yeah.
The fact that it came to you after he passed, it could have not felt safe enough to think about those things or face them when he was still alive. There could have been some feeling of, okay, now he's gone. Both I can face it that he can't hurt me anymore, or if he did hurt me, or to even have those feelings come up when he's still alive. If you're trying to interact with him, it would be hard to hold on to both things of loving him or knowing him and feeling those things. Were you still close to him at the end of his life?
Yeah, I would say there were still times that he had a very bitter tongue, so he might say things that are very hurtful. But he was very helpful during my, when I was going through a divorce, and I had two small kids that were 5 and 8. He was very helpful in looking after them. So in a way, I felt guilty of even thinking those things because he helped me a lot because I was the youngest, Because of me, he left Iran, and, it's just, so, yeah, I mean, we were okay, and we were close. I mean, my kids, especially my son, was very close to him.
Well, there's something there. We tend to make people very all good or all bad when obviously no one is, and especially in childhood, if there is some trauma or things that come up, we can stay stuck in that type of thinking. And so it seems like you had a hard time being mad at him or accepting these things he might have done negatively while also feeling grateful for the good that he did. And so maybe more reason why you didn't want to face those negative parts. You just wanted to see him as good, or just see the good in what he was doing. But he was like anyone, complicated and had more than one facet to him, and some good things and some very hurtful things about how he was, or having him as your father, that I think you're carrying with you. But going back to those comments he made, now whether or not there was more than just comments, if there was actions, it's possible. I mean, it's hard. Obviously, I can't say, and even it seems like it's hard for you to recall anything, but you're wondering if... Is that wondering just because of those comments, or is there anything else that comes up for you that makes you think maybe?
Yeah, because of those comments.
Okay. Yeah. It's, but either way, now, of course, if there's some behaviors, actions happen, it would probably make it worse. But those comments themselves, we can see how they would make you feel uncomfortable with your body, yourself as a sexual being. So,
Right.
And you're saying even you wouldn't be around him and still would think, you had internalized his voice of what would he think about what I'm wearing right now. Is that what you meant even when you were away from him, or was when you were in college at home?
No, when I was in college at home.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, but nonetheless, it's hard to think you wouldn't have had that with you in some way of how you feel about yourself. Do you remember how comfortable you felt with yourself and your body and sexuality as a, teenager going into your 20s?
I never felt pretty enough. Even though I was very, very skinny, I never felt that I was skinny. I mean, my sister's comments didn't help. I mean, she's 13 years older than me, and she would always make comments, oh, you got fat, you this, that. She would make these kind of comments. So I never felt pretty enough. I always felt like no guy would be interested in me. So I had a very bad self-esteem.
Yeah, which seems definitely like there's a basis to that based on how they treated you, that you would feel that way about yourself or your sister, but then also the comments from your father and things of that sort. There could have been at some level a defense of thinking no one wants me, because then you don't have to
Yeah.
face being in a relationship, being sexual. So it can sound paradoxical, but you'll often see this. People will think, oh, no one wants me, and that feels so bad. And we would think, well, why might they actually want to feel that way or think that way? And we could see that it could actually be a defense, be a protection. If no one wants me, if I'm not even a candidate for those things to happen that I don't want to do, I don't have to ever worry about it. So it can be very complicated in that way, that you might have had genuinely that self-esteem was affected by these comments and things, but you might have preferred not even being able to be someone who dates or, is sexual.
Yeah, and while I was waiting during commercial, I was thinking of this man who made a comment about having intimacy before he goes to Iran, and I'm thinking could be the other way around, that he wants, before he leaves, he wants to make sure that we are intimate. So maybe I would not find someone, even though he says, "Oh, you can find anyone after whatever." It's part of him making sure that I'm attached to him.
It's possible. We don't know his intentions without him telling us, and even if he does, but we know he could be telling you not the untruth or not the truth about it. It's possible. I get the sense the way you're talking about it, he's making it very no strings attached. So
Yeah.
I don't get the sense he's trying to keep you more or make sure you're locked on him. It's possible, but it doesn't seem to me, based on what you're saying, it's very much about you can find someone else, or I don't know. I mean, what does he say about your relationship when he goes to Iran? Does he want to continue communicating a lot?
Because
Or
you can, if I come back and you don't have anyone in your life, and I'm not going back to Iran, then we can continue.
okay, lots of ifs. But what about when he's there? Have you talked about, okay, when he's there, you want to stay in contact or communicate, or has he said, I'm going to be busy and I can't communicate?
No, he says I'm going to continue, communicating with you and so forth. So he's going to keep in touch.
Okay, and outside of this, we're focusing a lot on the sexual part. How do you see him as a partner or a person for you to be with?
See, that's another thing. There are things in him that I feel that is missing in me. That attracts me, that carelessness, not really thinking about, future all that much, doing what feels right today. I have a lot of fun with him when we're together. I laugh a lot, and, we both, say that we have such a good time when we're together. His personality is very, very live and fun. And it helps me also, to hang loose.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's good that you're aware of that. We often are attracted to someone who has the suppressed qualities of our own personality being expressed. So if you feel like, for you, rules and doing things just this right way and being a little bit more to yourself in that way is your norm. When you see someone who can be so free and fun, and just let go, there's definitely something appealing about that to you, because it's something in you that you wish you could express more. And actually, it does seem like when you're with him, some more of that does come out, which can feel really good. You probably feel much more alive, because we put away parts of ourselves because we're afraid that of what happens if we express those parts, but we feel a little bit dead inside when we don't express them. And then when someone allows for that, it can feel very alive and feel really exciting. And so it's understandable that would feel good. Now, there does seem to be a sense that he might be so much the other way that you might not be a match long term, because it would be too much of him being that way. That's a quick judgment for me to make, but it's just something for you to be aware of, that sometimes it's that opposites attract issue where it's actually not a healthy thing. It's just something pulling you in that way. So you have to be aware of that. The way you're describing him, it seems, there's a lot of things that shout short term in what he's saying. And how it's unstable, and it is a very unstable situation of him going, and I don't know if I'm coming back, and all of those things. So I would have concern if you commit too much of yourself emotionally to someone in this circumstance. Maybe there's something safe about that for you too, that he's going, as much as it would hurt. It's kind of like, rather than this being long distance, it's going to become long distance, and so there could be something safe in that for you. So as you might be actually more okay with that or unconsciously more comfortable with that. So you have to think about that aspect of it as well. It seems like, there's a lot for you to face. I don't know if you've gone to your own long-term therapy, but I would highly recommend it, because a lot of what you're dealing with are some deeper issues from the past. And if you don't address them, they will keep, dictating your life, because it'll be too hard for you to let go of that, because I think the anxiety is running the show in your relationship life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't want that.
I have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. So I would highly recommend, I really enjoyed our conversation, and therapy will be like this, but much more intense and more in depth, and will allow you to explore those memories and things that happened more deeply. And it'll allow you to feel more alive from yourself. It seems like in this relationship, he's bringing some of that, which is good, and you'll have a partner that does that, but hopefully you can even get more in touch with that on your own. But right now, I feel like you've put away lots of parts of yourself.
Since it's so difficult to find a good therapist, I live in Florida, but it's just so difficult to find somebody who's good and in tune with you, just like, what you just did in this, 45 minutes, 40 minutes. Do you do out-of-state counseling via Zoom and all that?
No, right. It's complicated with the pandemic. The laws had become more lax, but they're changing again. It's a blurry thing, so I can't tell you I could see you. And yes, finding a therapist the match is really important. If you don't feel like the person can understand you, no one's going to understand you perfectly, but have some understanding of, culture can be important. And things of that nature, and overall just getting a sense that they can understand you and get you is important. But I would say keep looking. It's actually kind of like the dating, where it's like you keep looking. If you've looked, keep looking, ask around. If being Iranian is very important for you, that's good. If you feel like male or female makes a difference for you, look. But I'm sure you'll be able to find someone, and they don't have to be Iranian, to be honest with you. I think that's could be
I've been
ideal.
Here since I was 15, so
okay,
I'm not
really.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it might feel more ideal. Someone who's Iranian American would likely be more of a match for you and understand that. But I work with clients that are not Iranian, and it can work out just fine. Match is not just these things on paper that we can say for sure. It's if they're Persian or not Persian, it's good or bad. It's a little bit more complex than that. So I would say really look for it and be ready to commit to that. Even with that, it's that there could be a fear of even committing to therapy at times, and you might even find yourself jumping around to different people trying to find quote unquote the right one. At first, I would say yes, it's okay, but once you've met with a few, pick one and just go forward with them for 6 months, a year at least, and dig a little bit deeper into these things.
I will definitely do that.
Okay.
Thank you so much for giving me so much time.
Oh, I really enjoyed it. Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. Wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Have a wonderful New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you too. Thank you. All right, let's go to another commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's go to another caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air. Hello. Thanks for calling.
Hello?
Yes, hi. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
I have a question regarding neurofeedback for my 6-year-old.
Okay.
I don't know if I should start asking my questions, or do
you can. I mean, I'll be, honest with you. I don't have I can't say I'm an expert on that. We could talk a bit about it. It definitely could be helpful for certain different issues. But yes, you can definitely ask your question, and we can see what we can get to. Go ahead.
So the reason I actually took him, because I saw a little bit of a changes in his behavior during the last 2 years.
Okay.
It was actually right before COVID, and he was in preschool. And when COVID hit, I felt like, being home and everything got worse. And I talked to a psychologist over the phone, and a lot of people were telling me, COVID really affected kids, and it could be a reason everybody is home and all that. But then when I talked to the psychologist, giving them all these the different things that I was seeing in him, they recommended that he might have some anxiety And if we do, after a few times I talked to the psychologist, he said, she mentioned if we could do TOVA test on him, it might help me figure out what's going on, and then we can take it from there. So I actually took him to Dr. Mohseni last week on Friday. And not Dr. Mohammadi. I'm sorry, Mohsen Mohammadi.
We don't have to get, I know you wanted to share the name. We don't have to, just because when we talk about someone else's work.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Gave the wrong name.
That's okay, yeah.
And so, and then we did the test, and with all the results he mentioned, and we went over it and reading it together, that he does have some anxiety and ADD. Because I did mention that he's actually very concentrated on things he wants to do, and I actually never thought I'm going to have any concentration issues with him at all, because he was very always concentrated on things he was doing. But he did mention actually kids with ADD, or adult people in general with ADD, actually pay a lot of attention to the stuff that they like to do and not to the other stuff. And he said probably a minor, a little bit of a OCD also. He did recommend neurofeedback for him, but I don't really have enough information about it. I don't know what is the best resource to get information, because I need to figure out exactly if this is going to be a good, effective way. How many times do we have to do this exactly? How many sessions is going to be good? Is it going to be really long-term or not? And if you know anything that where I can actually get some good scientific information about this, any recent studies that could help, if you know of any at all.
I mean, I don't have any on the top of my head. There's obviously, when you Google, that's like the first thing I would do, but most people do. And then you want to look, there's going to be more academic articles. You have to, always look at who's writing the article. Sometimes if it's a center that does something, well, of course, there's going to be a bias there. But, you can find research on these things. So neurofeedback can be helpful for the things you're talking about. At 6 years old, I also think, yes, on one hand, we want to address issues as they come up, and the earlier the better. But we also don't want to overreact about if your child has some anxiety or a little bit of ADHD or a little OCD, to really determine that those are the major issues that are going on. As you mentioned, COVID, there's lots of things that are happening. So I would also be a bit cautious. Now, neurofeedback is one of those things that it doesn't really have a huge negative side effect profile. There's nothing we're really worried about happening. But as far as making the investment and doing things, I can understand you're wondering, what to do. So before we get into the neurofeedback, we'll come back to that. Can you tell me a bit of what's going on with him, what's happening with your son?
My major issue with him was when I realized that when he gets angry, he has a hard time controlling his emotions.
Okay.
And I feel like I didn't really realize this earlier because he was just very small. And I thought, it's just something that he's a kid, and we would get better. And I actually have to say we never had any terrible 2 or any terrible 3 with him at all. I never had those issues. But I realized once he was probably around 4.5, close to 4.5 when I started realizing. And the other thing that was making me think of anxiety was his sleep. He was a good sleeper when he was a baby, and here and there he would wake up, but around 4.5, he would wake up every night until today, in the middle of the night, and he wants to come to our bed. And whatever I do just doesn't work. He would come and sleep till morning. He has no problem falling asleep again. But it's just something waking him up every night. And that was the other thing when I talked to the psychologist. Mentioned this could be anxiety because, once we can figure out the anxiety part, that's probably what is keeping him awake in the middle of, or waking him up in the middle of the night.
You said ever since he's 4.5 that's been happening?
Yes.
So about 2 years now?
About 2 years. Yeah, he's going to be 6.5 in March.
Yeah. Are there any other kids?
Yeah, we have. He has an older sister.
How old is she?
8.
8. Okay. The sleep thing we'd also want to look at because, of course, there's something waking him up, but there's also something waking him up, not just the anxiety that he gets to come to your bed, which he probably likes that comfort of. And so, and when you say every night, do you mean literally every single night?
Literally every single night. Even once in a blue moon, if he doesn't wake up, I get surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're probably waking up at 4 now too, just expecting him to walk in your room.
Yeah.
So, that's something I would think very strongly about how we can change that. And sometimes a frustration can build from parents when something like this happens, because it, I'm sure, affects your sleep. And you've tried lots of things, you said, and probably basically have given up at this point and just accepted it. But parents could feel sometimes a resentment or even upset with their children. I don't know if you feel any of that about this situation with him, of him coming to your bed.
I don't, I was kind of disappointed that this happened because I didn't have this with my first one. She's such a good sleeper, and for me it was like I did the same thing that I did for her. What happened here?
Yeah.
I felt like I did something wrong, but then obviously kids could be very different, and they are actually very different, very different in personality. I'm not upset at him. I don't ever talk to him about, how bad it is that you wake up and I'm so disappointed. But I always try to encourage him with different things to make him sleep in his bed. And if there is anything like, he was in animals a lot, like buying stuff at home and having like a reptile or something. And we even promised that, and we tried that. It didn't work. He would wake up. I would talk to him, and he's like, no, I just don't want it anymore. And nothing worked. So I felt like maybe it's more than that, because nothing is really even keeping him happy or excited about what he wanted to get. And it might be something else that it's like a physiology or something that needs to be fixed to help him sleep too. And that's when we talked about this, and then I talked about the controlling his anger and emotion, because that's affecting the relationship with the sister too, because he gets really mad and then she doesn't want to play anymore because she gets upset, and then you see the constant fighting. They do play pretty well too, but then this happens too, obviously. Some of it is normal being siblings, and they're obviously different sex, but some of it I see that he definitely is very set on what he thinks, and if he doesn't get it, he gets really upset. And I really try to talk to him in a very, very, soft voice, and try to make him understand, let's talk. Let's talk very soft. That's not how I'm talking to you. Let's, lower your voice. Let's see what happened. Maybe we can take a deep breath. Maybe
That's
we go
good.
take, drink a glass of water. And I try that. So when I, told all this to the psychologist, I was talking on the phone, and the sleeping part. And then the other thing I mentioned was every time he gets he's to a point that he's getting anxious and upset about something, he would scratch his body like it's itching. But if you look at his skin, there's nothing there. You won't see anything. And I even took him to a dermatologist to take a look at his skin. They said maybe there's a mild eczema, but no, there's nothing. I try to put a lotion after every shower. But I think it's like a habit or something that calms him down, maybe.
Yeah.
And I used to mention, not for him not to do it, but then I stopped, because then I was told and I realized it's better not to bring attention to it. And all of this, added up, and then it was a conclusion that there might be anxiety going on. And it would be better if we could get some therapy, or because I've been hearing your dad talking about TOVA tests and all the results that could come out. So I thought about getting TOVA done for him.
Yeah. Well, a few things. One is, you brought up something yourself of parenting is so hard for multiple reasons, but even when you have multiple kids, you can see that doing the same thing with a different kid, you don't get the same result, because the child, each child is different. So everything you're saying to me points very strongly to anxiety. Now, there could be some ADHD and things as well, but the anxiety seems very, very pronounced, very loud. That's a big part of what's going on. Even this itching, even if you're saying it's calming himself, well, yeah, why is he trying to calm himself? He's probably feeling anxious, tense. And that's why even we don't want to just focus on the scratching or the itching or whatever it is, because that's not the problem. There's something leading to him dealing with it in that way. So just saying stop doing that is not the problem, because something else is going on. And also the anger, you're talking about anxiety. It's this feeling of wanting things to be a certain way. When we're anxious, we really want it to be a certain way. And when it doesn't go his way, we're probably seeing that reaction that you're talking about, that he almost feels like he can't hold it in and he reacts with anger. What you're doing, though, I think there's a lot of good there of trying to help him calm down. So we're not just going to take away his feelings; not going to disappear. We want to help him in managing his emotions and how can he have that feeling but respond in a way that's better even for him. And so helping him calm down, taking deep breaths, see if he can wait a few seconds, things like that. But I think everything you're talking about points fairly strongly to anxiety being the issue. Yeah. So taking the TOVA was, that could be good to see if we get some kind of clarity of what's going on. I know some ADD came up, but anxiety and even some OCD was there. And even that itching, could there be, that scratching, could there be something related to OCD? It's possible. I'm not against him getting neurofeedback, and if that was suggested by a doctor, I try to be careful. People sometimes call in and they're already seeing a therapist or psychiatrist, and I don't want to interfere with treatment that is ongoing in any way. Play therapy could also be helpful. Now, that could be a bit of a challenge even for myself. I haven't seen children during the pandemic unless it's in a family type setting, because play therapy, it's hard to do over Zoom or over the video chatting. But you still might be able to find that some places are open. So that's something to look at. Play therapy for him might be helpful as another way of approaching it. And it's not either or necessarily. You could do both.
Okay, so as far as getting more information for neurofeedback, I should just Google and see.
I mean, I know I'm not being very helpful with that by saying Google it, but
fine.
But it's, I think there's a lot of research on it that you can find, and especially, and then each case is different. You want to obviously look for your son at his age and certain things. That's more important than if there's something on teenagers. But there's definitely can be benefits to it. I think also I wouldn't look at something like this, like, well, he's going to get neurofeedback and his anxiety goes away. You look like you have an anxious son, and he's going to have some anxiety no matter what you do. We want to make it less, make it more manageable. I think the sleeping issue is something to really look at, because almost 2 years of it being an every night thing, it's going to be very hard to break. And that's actually why when I brought up the frustration, it wasn't that obviously I don't think you should be frustrated with him, but I can understand the frustration. And especially I was thinking, when you try to change this, we have to realize how difficult it's going to be on all of you, but especially on him, to change the sleeping. So you might get frustrated in that process of if you try to try again to get him to stay in his bed, which will involve when he wakes up, staying with him till he falls asleep. And even that's going to be tough. He's like, no, this is not how we do things. I come to your bed, I fall asleep, we're all happy with this. But so changing it's going to be challenging, because he's so used to that being the way things go. And that's what I also was thinking of, the frustration that I can imagine when you try to change it, he's going to resist really hard. And so it's going to be a process. We want to make him part of the process. We have to know there's going to be lots of setbacks. It's not going to be smooth sailing, and it's going to be probably harder for everyone for a while. You're probably all going to get a little bit less sleep while you try to make this happen, and we might have to accept that that's part of the process to get to a goal of having him be able to spend the night in his own bed.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor.
Sure,
I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, let's go to our last commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is my last show of 2021. And as a result of that, it could be a good time to think about next year and what you want to do. Really, there's no reason why January 1st should be the time to set goals or to think about our lives, but it does seem to happen that we are very much connected to calendars and the way time goes forward. Even if you think about it, a week, when Monday comes around, it feels like something new is starting, even though really there's no reason to think of it that way, or it doesn't have to be seen that way. But we tend to have that feeling. We're the first of the month. And then so of course we can think, if you're in a different country with a different calendar, your first of the month is different than theirs. So there is an arbitrariness to it, but nonetheless, the way that we conceptualize time has a big impact on how we feel about things. And so as we go forward, this in a way is related to what I brought up at the beginning of the show, talking about goals and realizing it's still going to be you in that next year. It's not going to be a new you. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't set some big goals for ourselves and to see what we can do to improve on ourselves. So yes, I said it's not going to be a different you, but if I didn't believe that people could change, I would not do this show and I would not be a therapist, because the whole goal there is to make things change or to make improvements. It doesn't mean they're going to be huge and sweeping all of a sudden. Genuine change is slow and takes time, but makes it even more meaningful and lasting. And so I hope as people reflect on goals, and people tend to have the typical goals of getting in shape, losing weight, quitting something they're doing more of something like reading, exercising, or some new skill. And all of those can be good. And on previous shows, and maybe at the beginning of the year, I'll talk about it again. I'll talk about things like setting SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, meaning that it's hard, but something you can achieve, relevant to you, and then time-oriented, meaning it has some kind of like a time limit. So losing, let's say, 20 pounds in 3 months, or quitting smoking by a certain date. It could be good to look at how you set your goals to make you more or less likely to succeed. What I wanted to talk about now is when we look at the new year, often what people do is they also reflect on this last year and look forward, which I think can be good. Again, we can and probably should do this more often than just when it comes to the changing of the year, but it does tend to make us think that way. Birthdays usually make that happen for people as well, or specific anniversaries can do that, but New Year's can definitely be one where people look at themselves and their lives and things of that sort. One thing I hope people will also think about when we're looking at goals is our relationships. Now, this is an interesting one because usually when people set goals, of course, we can get support and help from people and might even get a coach or a trainer or therapist or different things to help us with certain things. But nonetheless, they're usually personal goals, meaning that they're more in our control. If you are going to stop smoking cigarettes, a lot of factors affect that, but at the end of the day, it's about you and done by you and solely by you. But when we're talking about relationships, of course, we're talking about you and someone else. So only 50% of it really, we could say, is in your control when we're talking about relationships between two people. But nonetheless, I hope people will look at their relationships and think, how can I improve those? How can I make those better in the coming year and in the future? And so what that entails is, first, like a lot of things, you have to do an inventory. Look at those important relationships in your life, especially if you're in a committed romantic relationship, have a husband or wife, or boyfriend or girlfriend, or partner. That's one. If you're a parent, very important to look at that one. How am I as a parent in my child's life? There we can maybe say you have more than 50%. If you have a young child especially, it could be even way more than that, because you can impact the relationship significantly. And even other family members, close friends. But take a look at those relationships and really look at them as, how good are they? And by good, you can look at a lot of things. Of course, if we're having big problems, those stand out really largely, and we hear those very clearly. There's these fights we're having or disagreements we're having, but also how much good is in that relationship, and how close do I feel? Where is the emotional intimacy in my relationships? And of course, different relationships, we can expect different things or have a different ceiling for that. If you're in your romantic relationship, you can achieve some very, very strong and deep emotional intimacy. With a friend, it might be less than that. So, or definitely can be less as far as the ceiling. So we can think about that. How close am I with this person in my life? And then now what can I do to change that? Now, the what you can do has a few facets to it as well. There's things you can just change in your behavior. So you might realize, you know what? I'm going to reach out to this person more from my end. Or it could be, I want to say nicer things to my partner, or learn their love language, or if I already know their love language, do more things that are loving towards them. And so that is a very big part of it, is what can I do? And of course, if we're looking at a relationship and seeing what the problem is, really we can only change our side of things. So we can't say, oh, they need to be nicer, or they need to stop doing this. That's going to be the second part I'll talk about, can involve that. But really you have to look at what's in my control, what can I change in my relationship to make it better. And if you're saying nothing, then that tells me you're really not looking closely enough, or you are not able to be critical with yourself in the sense of actually looking at how you can grow. Because if you think you're perfect in any of your relationships, I have news for you. You're not, because you definitely can be better. And it takes a strong person actually acknowledge those weak points. You're not strong if you think you have no issues. It means you're just blind to them and are too afraid to look at them. So there's no strength in that. If I meet with a couple and they say we have no issues, I'm very sad to hear that, because I know it doesn't mean they don't have issues. It just means they have no awareness of the issues that they have, because every relationship has issues, has problems, has areas that are weak and areas that can be strengthened. That's just how it is in any relationship between two people. So I hope you'll take a look at that and how can I be better in my relationships, and especially the closer ones? How can I be a better partner? And then also, there's something about what's going on between you and your partner that is not all on you, but that's something that you could then talk to your partner about, or whoever this relationship is with. That here are some of the issues I think we have, or I want us to create a more emotionally intimate relationship. I've worked with couples in therapy where at times that's become the main goal. It wasn't necessarily some big glaring problem was there, but creating a depth of emotional intimacy is what we were trying to create. And why this is important is for a few reasons. One is, well, it feels amazing. If you are in an emotionally intimate relationship, that closeness, that support, that connection is probably the greatest thing we can experience as humans. And it's a longer lasting feeling, not like some kind of a high. It's just a feeling that's there. So we have an incredibly nice feeling when we have that emotional intimacy. At times I use the analogy of climbing a mountain. The harder you work to create that emotional intimacy, the higher you get, the more beautiful the view you get to enjoy. So you get to enjoy that. And then on top of that, it makes your relationship stronger when you have more of a deep emotional connection, so that you can withstand the things that life will throw your way, which is both external, things happen on the outside, even like something like COVID, or you go through a financial challenge or a health challenge, or something happens that's out of your control, or things that come up within the relationship, which inevitably will happen as well. So it also strengthens the relationship. It's kind of like the roots of the relationship. The deeper and the stronger they go, the more that tree can withstand some winds that are hitting it and coming its way. So for those reasons, it's very important to do that. So you can talk to your partner about how can we create a better relationship. And so that wording there is very important. It's not you need to become better in these ways to make our relationship work out, or this is what's wrong with you. It's that how can we create a better relationship together? And again, every relationship, one, has issues, and two, can be stronger or better or improve. You can make that emotional intimacy increase in your relationship. So again, if you're thinking either I'm doing nothing wrong in this relationship, or there's nothing wrong in our relationship, or it can't be better, that just tells me you're not looking at it closely enough, accurately enough, objectively enough, and openly enough to being open to seeing what's there. And hopefully your partner will be receptive to that let's look at that. Not everyone will be. And so this is again where we look at the issues of only some of it is in your control. You can't control your partner's willingness to want to work on things to make things better, and then what they do in that process if they actually agree to do so. A lot of this working on relationships is tough work. I think anyone you'll ever meet will say, I want to work on my relationship. I want to do that work. It's one of those things everyone says, but most people don't do the hard work to make it happen. Just like everyone says, I want to exercise or be healthy, or I want to read more, but not everyone does it because it isn't easy. It takes hard work. It takes dedication. And with working on relationships, it takes a lot of going into uncomfortable places, having uncomfortable conversations, looking within ourselves at things that might be uncomfortable to look at, whether it's from our past or weaknesses or things that we currently are bringing with us, and genuinely looking at them. So you can't control your partner's willingness. You can control how you ask them about it, and the more loving you can make it, the more collaborative you can make it, the less you blame them that they are the problem, they need to change, but make it a we type of a issue. You can be more likely, but still there's no guarantee of how they'll respond. But I hope people think about that when we look at our lives, because it's interesting that we know relationships are the things that make life more meaningful and the things that contribute most to our overall well-being and emotional well-being and happiness long term, but we often don't think of them in this way, the same way we do about other goals that we set, where we think about making something better. We often do think mostly about the personal, which makes sense. That's much more in our control, and there's many more facets to that. But we don't often think about, how can I make my relationships better, and especially those most important relationships, how can those be better going forward? What kind of goals can I set there? And the goals might be less tangible, like reading 2 books a month or something like that. The numbers might be a little bit different, but there can be some principles that you're trying to get to, some values of emotional intimacy, closeness. How do you feel in the relationship, that are more subjective but are very, very valuable, and you can still look at them and evaluate them and make it something that you work on together. So I hope you'll think about that as you're setting your goals, reflecting on your 2021 and thinking forward to 2022 and beyond. How can I improve my relationships in my life? All right, that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you to all the callers and everyone out there. Wishing you a happy new year, and I'll be with you early in 2022. Have a wonderful day.